Hello and welcome to Vibrant Lives podcast, a podcast dedicated to your health and well-being, featuring interviews with experts about nutrition, physical health, mental health, and my 5-minute food facts series, which are short episodes where I discuss nutrition-related topics. I'm Amanda Hayes, your host, a lawyer turned nutritionist, and I'm on a quest to learn as much as I possibly can about living a healthy, active and fulfilling life, which I would call a vibrant life, and sharing what I learn with you here on this podcast. The health and nutrition space can be a confusing one where information and misinformation mingle, and untangling fact from fiction and identifying reliable, trustworthy sources of information is not always straightforward. My aim is to help you do that by speaking with knowledgeable guests who can explain their area of expertise in an accessible way and provide you with practical tips that you can use to improve your own well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, I'll quickly acknowledge that any information or advice provided in Vibrant Lives podcast is not intended to be used to treat or prevent medical conditions, and it's never a substitute for advice from your own health professionals. Today, I am here with Nathan Bolton. The focus of our conversation today is mental health, especially men's mental health, an extremely important and I would venture to say somewhat neglected topic. And we'll talk more to that in our interview, and on that note we will be touching on suicide, so this is a trigger warning about that. Nathan's path to becoming an advocate for men's mental health is an extraordinary one. Nathan joined the Australian Defence Force and qualified after arduous training to be part of the Special Operations Engineer Regiment. He was deployed twice to Afghanistan where, amongst other things, he defused Improvised Explosive Devices, IEDs, in other words, landmines. So every day over there, Nathan was playing Russian roulette with life and death. He faced unimaginably tense and terrifying situations. After he returned from Afghanistan, traumatised, life looked pretty bleak for Nathan, and we'll discuss how he was able to pull himself back from the brink and how his life's mission is now to help other men suffering from mental health issues. If you want to hear more about Nathan's experience in Afghanistan, what it was like, I recommend listening to the podcast Youngblood about men's mental health with Callum McPherson, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And in that podcast, Nathan explains what it was like for him over there. And honestly, when I was listening to it, I found it quite spine-chilling. And it's the first time I've heard a direct experience of what it was like in Afghanistan for an Australian soldier. So do tune into that if you're interested to hear more about that. So now it's time to meet Nathan. So today I'm here with Nathan Bolton, men's mental health advocate and resilience trainer. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. So Nathan's got a very interesting story to tell. And before we get into that, I'd like to start with a few questions just to get to know a little bit about you outside your work as a men's mental health and resilience trainer. So Nathan, where did you grow up?
I am a Adelaide local, Adelaide born and bred here in our good old Radelaide. So it's and then from there just travelled around Sydney, Darwin, then back to Adelaide after all my my work roles. Yeah, but come back to Adelaide. That's where I wanted to be.
Excellent. And your favourite form of exercise?
It's a really good question. I'm a bit of an all-rounder. I love gym, love circuits. Because all-round fitness and a bit of running. Yeah, I'm a bit of an all-rounder. Keep everything moving. Keeping everything guessing, as they say.
Yep. Do you enter any sort of sports competitions, like, I don't know, like running races or CrossFit or?
Well, I hadn't run much, and then my mate came to me. He's like, "Bolts, do you want to do a half marathon on the weekend?" And I was like, "Okay." So went from running around the block to running a half marathon that weekend. He managed to get me to do 2 more, and then I did the Hubert 100.
Oh, wow.
Up in Flinders. I did the marathon, the 42 marathon.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
I didn't train leading up to it, just slugged it out in the day. So it was a bad day, but it's amazing how far you can push yourself. You just sometimes most people don't show themselves how far they really can go.
Do you know, that is exactly what I like. I like trail running, and that's what I like, that getting to that place when you're physically in pain, but mentally you keep going. Like
100%.
your whole body's saying stop, 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 but you don't.
Very much so. And it's amazing how many people listen to their body and just go, oh, no, everything's telling me to stop. I'm like, nothing's telling you to stop. You're telling yourself to stop.
Oh, it's fascinating. Unless you break your leg or something then. But if otherwise, but I have to train a lot.
I sort of gave up on the running dream after that. I took a bit of a hiatus after that one. I was like, that one hurt. My mate did the 160 Ultra.
Oh,
so
my God.
Heart of a lion, that man. So
kudos to him. Go-to meal for dinner.
Go-to meal for dinner? Oh, my gosh. See, I'm a very simple man. A man of routine. I love my salad. Yeah. Salad with a side of steak, salad with a side of chicken.
Yeah. No, sounds good. Nice and healthy.
Salad. But then if I was my main meal, I love pizza. That is my guilty pleasure.
Yeah, guilty. It's yummy. And are you enjoying listening to anything at the moment? Music, podcast, book?
Yeah, I love listening to audiobooks. Right now, I'm currently listening to Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've read that one.
That's a goodie. Yeah, it's, you can listen to that man talk all day. And I actually just finished the Resilience Project.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's on my list of...
fantastic.
A lot of friends have recommended that one, actually.
Yeah, real down-to-earth, genuine guy who just wanted to make a difference.
Yeah, that's good. And your favourite way to relax? Do you relax?
I don't always practice what I preach. However, I love my motorbike.
Yep.
I jump on that, ride off into the hills, disappear, and just like focus just on the road, wind blowing in your face. That's my downtime. If I need to disappear. Or going for a hike with headphones on, listen to an audiobook where I can literally shut down my thinking side of the brain and just listen and just learn and just disappear off into the book.
Nice. And do you have a favourite or a dream holiday destination?
I do have a couple. Japan. I'd love to go to Japan. It's obviously ski fields, but then also I love the old traditional notions where honour meant something. There's something about that to me is quite poetic.
Yeah. How
someone was willing to self-sacrifice rather than bring shame and dishonour to their family. I'm like, that's it's quite powerful in itself. But also I love to go to Maldives would be amazing.
Oh, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah. All the pictures look so good.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Anything like that. Or the Aurora Borealis in Iceland. That's me.
Yeah. No, that'd be cool too. Oh, maybe one day. Maybe. One day. Into your life now and your work. So you worked as part of the Special Forces of the Australian Defence Force. Mm-hmm. And for people like me who don't know a lot about the Australian Army, can you explain what are the Special Forces and also the unit you were in, which is the Special Operations Engineer Regiment? Tell us a bit about all of that.
Sure. So in essence, you got your general army or your regular army, and then you got a small contingent of guys who make up the Special Forces. Mm-hmm. They are a group of people who are willing to put themselves through quite rigorous training programs in order to prove that they're worthy for the position. You got the SAS, which is it as crude as this analogy and the way I've put this out there will be. SAS, they're like the elite of the elite. They get all the training, all the perks. They are renowned for, these sneaky peeky sort of stuff. They go in, like in Afghanistan, they'll get intelligence that there's a certain high-ranking insurgent or Taliban commander in a village. They'll go in, they'll jump on their choppers, fly in, kill, capture, and then come out. Commandos, they're pretty much the muscle
Mm-hmm.
They're a bunch of guys who highly skilled, CQB, like close quarter battle and everything. And literally, they'll be like, there's a village over there. We know there's a lot of bad guys in there. Go in there and stir the hornet's nest.
Wow.
So you're pretty much walking into ambushes. So that's who I worked with predominantly when I was overseas. And then you got the special ops engineers. We're like the red-headed stepchild of special forces. And we support both those two units with engineer support. So over in Afghanistan, our primary job role was the search and clearance of improvised explosive devices. In short, our job is to find the hidden bombs or the roadside bombs.
The landmines.
The landmines buried in the ground. And, but we also, if there is anything that's outside the role that a shooter, so the SS and the commanders are called shooters, that they didn't want to carry or they didn't want to do, give it to an engineer.
Right.
And so we did chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear warfare, advanced decontamination, bridge building, water purification. Like I'm talking like everything. Like,
So you were clearing the way for the other guys to get to their target. Is that kind of part of it?
Yeah. So we use the metal detectors and try to find the bombs as they're buried there, and hence the name, which is the motto of our unit, which is Inter Hustis es Hostis, which means between spears and enemy. Mm-hmm. So we're usually out the front, clearing the way to get there, usually the first point of call.
Right. God, that's amazing. Excuse my sort of very basic language here, but it's different from a regular soldier, so you needed special training. Is it very physical, that training, or is it mental?
Very physical. So to get into those units, there's usually a selection program. Mm-hmm. The selection program for SOA, when I first got in there, wasn't so much. It wasn't a very renowned unit at the time. Mm-hmm. So we pretty much piloted everything and created everything. But when you try out for like SAS, which I did, which is the SS Australia, the TV show everyone has been watching lately, which has inspired that TV show. 21 days of sheer mental and physical hell. Where you're tested, I guess, well beyond what you deem to be your limits. Yeah,
that's amazing. Before we came on air, we were just talking about the book Make Your Bed by William McRaven, and he delivered a commencement speech to the University of Texas class in 2014. So it's on YouTube, that speech, and I think it's gone viral. But he talks about his Navy SEAL training 100%. In that, and they basically just try and break you.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like I remember like they're doing it for a reason, and it may sound horrid in what it sounds like, and you might watch the show and go, "Oh wow, how can you do this?" But they're trying to see what you're made of. Yeah, and they want to see when you have nothing left physically, that mentally, regardless of how you are thinking or feeling, you will always keep going, and you will always keep your head cool, and you'll always keep moving forward, and you'll be there for your mates. I lost 15 kilos in 21 days.
Far out.
Shredded. Oh, yeah. It was brutal. You literally eat yourself alive, and that's why you make sure you go in there with plenty of reserve, because you know that weight loss is going to be...
Far out.
Especially when you don't get fed for 5 days.
And also, if you think about that's what's happening to your body, imagine what's happening to your brain in that time, you know? It's not getting the energy that it needs. And... is it surprising? You line up at the start of this training and you might think, oh, that short guy over there, he's not going to make it. Yeah. And then do people surprise you? Like, do people you think may not make it turn out to be really tough and that kind of thing? Or
and that is a beautiful expression that what's his name from the book?
William McRaven.
Yeah, said in his thing. He goes, "Don't judge a man by the size of his flipper. Judge a man by the size of his heart."
Yeah.
And you realise, like I remember this one guy, big bald fella, muscly as all hell, and he comes on there looking all angry and tough. I was like, oh, geez, he didn't last 3 days.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It's normal, the most unsuspecting guys are the ones that are full of heart. And they just keep going and going and going. And the big guys actually really struggle to complete those courses, because in the end we got a lot more body, a lot more muscle mass, and we use a lot more calories to do the same job as a shorter guy. And so literally we will rip through our reserves at a far quicker rate than the shorter guys. And so it's usually a lot of short guys that always just keep on going.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It makes me think of elite runners in the trail running scene are often quite slight for the same kind of reason. Like it's a more economical, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
So twice, Nathan, you were deployed in Afghanistan. Maybe you can set the scene by talking about that a bit, and then we'll move on to what happened to you afterwards. So I know it's really hard to summarise, and I mentioned in the introduction the podcast that you did, Youngblood, Men's Mental Health with Callum McPherson, and I'll put a link in the show notes because that is an extraordinary explanation of what you went through and what it was like. So perhaps you can set the scene to sort of how you felt over there and how that leads into what happens after you get back.
Sure. I guess in a nutshell, brought up very stoic. I did not talk about feelings or emotions, so I suited into the military model very well. Deployed twice on my first tour. I found myself involved. I was blown up twice. My vehicle hit an IED and exploded, and I was standing next to another one and that exploded. My second tour was a lot rougher, a lot of gunfights, a lot of destruction and death. Carried mates off the battlefield. Jeez, I've had RPGs fly meters over my head, been pinned down by enemy gunfire.
Oh, God.
Contemplated my own death. I was laying on top of an IED when the main charge... I was laying on top of the pressure plate, and the main charge explosive part was underneath 5 of my mates. That was worst night of my life. But a lot of those experiences, because of my stoic way, I never really spoke about them.
Right.
And I had zero mental health literacy or emotional literacy to really even begin the process of understanding it.
Bury that stuff?
Oh yeah, I was absolutely gifted in the art of burying things. I'll just bottle it up, and like it would come in and it would just like within 30 seconds to a minute just disappear and go. Especially when one of my best mates was killed. Literally within 1 minute, I remember my heart just sank, but then suddenly it just disappeared. And I managed to convince myself that I didn't know him well enough, and that's the price of war and all these other thing. And I know now as a coping strategy in order to get through, because I didn't know how to deal or handle what I was going through. But as you can only imagine, I did not come away from all my experiences unscathed. Yeah,
well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you bury them for a while, but it's you can't continue to do that. So when you returned, you suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and major depression.
Yep.
And you refer to these as your darkest hours.
Yep.
So I thought it might be good to set a bit of a framework to understand what post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is, just so people understand our conversation going forward. So if you could explain to us what it is, what it means clinically, and then how did it manifest for you? Because I imagine it's a bit different for different people. Yep.
So I'm not a psychologist myself. So what I've learned, everything I've learned has come from the school of experience, or school of hard knocks, as they say. I guess when you go through an experience, PTSD occurs when you go through an experience that overwhelms your capacity to cope. And that night in that trench system, when I was laying on the bomb and the main charge, the bomb was underneath all my mates, that overwhelmed my capacity to cope.
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't know it, but in the end, so the problem is that when it overwhelms your capacity to cope, pretty much the sheer amount of cortisol running through your body will shut down the regions of your brain associated with processing memories. And so any incoming information becomes fragmented and disorganized. And then the adrenaline will actually strengthen the laying down of emotional memories. So suddenly you get this really strong laid down memories for fragmented information of a traumatic event.
Right.
And because of that, literally the experience itself will comes through a cluster of symptoms, such as intrusive memories. And because you haven't actually processed the memory, it keeps getting thrown forward saying, deal with me, but because of the emotional memory. And it was so painful, you go, hell no, get away.
Yeah.
And so then you also want to avoid anything that will trigger you. You learn very quickly, you don't want to go here, you don't want to go there, you don't want to go to a cafe, you don't want to sit over this, you don't want to go to crowds, you don't want to go to restaurants, and you start withdrawing and pulling yourself away from society to avoid anything that may trigger that intrusive memory coming forth. And you isolate yourself. I became a complete hermit for nearly 4 years.
God, how sad.
That's not where I am right now.
No.
I literally set up security cameras all around my house, completely paranoid. I would sit there and literally I could stare at a blade of grass and be completely engulfed in my past and have no idea that the world would just disappear. There's a great scene from American Sniper that really shows that when you're staring at the TV and you think he's watching a war film and he's watching a blank TV. Beautiful depiction of that experience. For me, it came about through like hyperarousal.
Yeah.
I was easily startled.
Yeah.
My nervous system would always be kicking in, always fight or flight would just boot in like instantly in any situation. I couldn't even bushwalk because my job was to look for bombs and dirt.
Yeah.
And so whenever I'm in dirt, I'll be looking for disturbed earth and going, what's a vulnerable point? Where can they predict me to go? And so doing the one thing that was meant to be relaxing became a very... a
triggering
experience. And...
God, it must have been hard for your family and friends to see that happening to you.
Yeah, but in the end, mental health wasn't spoken about back then.
No.
Like, we're going back to like my second tour was 2012, got out 2014, and then even then, like PTSD wasn't spoken about. Mental health definitely wasn't spoken about. Definitely not in the military.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's sort of where it's needed the most.
Yeah, but even in society, and I'm like, in the end, war experiences are my experiences, but anyone who's been through an accident or any sort of traumatic experience, I'm like, although our experiences are different, but no two people read the same book.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is that you've been through yourself, I'm like, the way that it impacts the body is always the same for everyone. And that's why I can relate to your experience and you can relate to mine.
Yeah. You were obviously suffering. You said you were like a hermit for 4 years. So what changed? Like, how did you recognise that you needed help? What happened?
So I was, because of my stoic ways, I was in complete denial.
Right.
Complete for years. I was like, hell no. What do you mean I can't handle my war experiences? And so the whole notion of going that I couldn't even handle that, it was the shame that riddled through that notion of, and the weakness that I portrayed the struggle to be. And so I externalized my symptoms of distress. I did anything in order to feel alive again. But it wasn't until 2014 when I got a rehabilitation rep to support me, and she watched me just self-destruct. And there was nothing she could do. She was trying to get me to seek psychological support. And I was like, no, I'm just lacking a bit of meaning.
Yeah.
I'm lacking just a bit of purpose. And it wasn't until I hit rock bottom, which is when I became, when to no longer be here was the most viable option. Up until that point, I would wake up each day to try to go to sleep that night, and every ounce of my energy was to try to protect myself from myself.
Oh my God.
And going from a really high achiever, like in 2013, I was awarded Soldier of the Year, and here I am 2 years later.
God.
I can't even justify my own breath. Going from that high achiever, optimistic, happy, joyful guy to this, I didn't understand what was going on. And when I hit rock bottom, that's when I finally let go. And I was like, if I had all the answers to help myself right now, I wouldn't be here. And scaring me, she literally held my hand, walked me into a GP, spoke for me because of the shame. I couldn't even say it to the GP's face to even get a referral. And I said whatever I had to say, and then before I knew it, I was seeing my first psych. And I went and saw 5 different psychologists over the first couple of years. First one, I think he knew I was in the military. I knew his entire life story.
Yeah.
I knew what his grandkids were doing.
Oh, right.
I knew everything, every job he'd ever
Isn't
done.
it meant to be the other way around?
And then he goes, Mum diagnosed me with bipolar. And I was just like, what the hell is this profession? And then went from one to the next and wasn't relating, wasn't interacting, couldn't work out what was going wrong until I met my last one, who completely changed my life.
So that was the fifth one.
My fifth one.
Well, that's an exercise in persistence itself, the fact that you kept going.
But I despised psychology by then.
Yeah.
I thought it was the most useless.
Ironic.
Yeah. To where I am today, running a psychology company, I'm like, it's... But I made some fundamental errors, and that's why I do what I do today. But in the end, I walked into her office, and I was like, who are you?
Were you just over it by then, thinking, another thing that's not going to work, here we go?
And I had to say it all over again and speak about it all again. And I understand the pain of having to do that, but the reality is you got to keep saying it until you find the right person who you not only feel comfortable with, but also can give you what you need. And then you only need to say it once.
Yeah. So you found the right person.
I found my person, and I was like, who are you? How are you any different? And what are you going to do for me? Like, I was angry. She called it an interrogation later on when we laughed about it. And literally, I'll never forget what she said next. She's like, Nathan, this isn't about me. This is about you. You're in my office. Why are you here?
Oh, good on her.
It was the biggest reframe of my life.
Well, that's interesting that it took you to 5 people for someone to say that, I think.
It's common too. It's common for someone not to go through anywhere up to 5 to 6 psychologists, psychiatrists before they find one that they should connect with.
Yeah.
Because the first couple of times you may go see one, like the anxiety of just being in the room with a psychologist and even just bearing your own soul or even attempting to actually engage in those conversations. A lot of guys don't have the vocabulary to even begin the conversation.
Well, especially if they've grown up in this stoic way and they've never had to do it before.
100%.
Yeah.
Hence why what we do today.
Yeah.
Trying to remember what the question was now. Sort of it disappeared for a little while. Went down a little rabbit hole.
Yeah. So we were talking about PTSD and the fact that you recognised that you needed help. Once you connected with this psychologist, clearly you're in a good space today. Like, how did she help you? Like, did she help you reframe the way you thought about things, or?
Yeah, but it was slow. Like, I've been seeing her for over 5.5 years, nearly 6 years now, and I still see her. Yeah. It's like my most favourite hour of every 2 months, 6 weeks.
Really?
Oh, love it.
Oh, good.
Because it's an opportunity to put forth anything that may be troubling you or stressing you out in life and to help you overcome it. But in the end, the thing that she did for me was, I remember my other psychs, they were like, we were talking about when I was blown up, like when my vehicle hit the IED. And I remember one of the psychiatrists saying to me, so Nathan, tell me how it felt. And I'm like, I don't know, shit. Like, how do you answer that? Yeah. A lot of guys don't have the vocabulary to engage in this conversation. And what guys need, and a lot of the latest research is actually showing, is that guys like to talk through their behaviours and goals. Yeah. Yeah. So speaking about it in a way that resonates for them. And it's about realising that psychology is not this one size fits all. You got to individualise each and every session for each and every client. And that's what makes it so challenging being a psychologist, is because they are literally having to walk into the world of each and every individual wherever they are in life. Yeah. And it's that level of empathy and understanding in order to enable you to feel comfortable in order enough to talk. Yeah. I completely take my hat off to any psychologist in that field, or psychiatrist in that field, because it is not an easy task. But goals and behaviours are what a lot of the guys want to talk to, because guys externalise their symptoms of distress. We'd rather talk about we'd rather tell someone we're drinking half a carton of beer every night rather than tell your mate that you're suffering from a broken heart, from a relationship breakup. And it's about being able to read through the signs and you very slowly filter that vocabulary into their everyday experience about what they're going through. And you don't go there the whole hog. You go to where they're at.
Yeah.
And knowing that the emotion stuff is the end point.
Yeah.
But it's for a lot of guys, it's not the starting line.
And it's also, as you say, you've got to, find your way there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weave your way to it.
And capitalize on their strengths.
Yeah. And
that's where we love like the humanistic approach about self-actualization, about being their best self. I'm like, don't always focus on the problem. Remind them about what they can do.
Yeah. Tell
them what they can do, because you're giving them a bit of agency, a bit of hope that they can actually still do something in order to get out of where they're currently at. And so, it's a strengths-based approach is also very important.
Yeah, I can see how that would appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you still see her. It's your favourite hour of every 6 weeks or whatever. This might be a silly question, but if you're recovering from PTSD and you also had depression as well, is it like an ongoing... It made me think a little bit, is it like recovering from addiction? You need to keep working at it. It's not like, oh, that's done, tick. Or, I mean, maybe it's different.
And I guess that's a great... what's the word I'm looking for? Myth that you got to bust. You'll never be fixed. In the end, once you have something like this, like PTSD or depression, it will always be a part of you.
Yeah.
But the reality is, for so many years, it was everything that I was. And by overcoming it, I put it into remission. Yeah. It's the only way I really know how to word it. It's not resolved. I'm not cured or fixed or anything like that. I have to work hard each and every day in order to do the things that I know I need to do to stay out.
Yeah. So you've got the toolkit now.
Very much so. Yeah. And I can listen to my body, and I can hear it when I start to burn out. Like this morning, just before this podcast, like anxiety. And I'm like, cool. No dramas. And I'm like trying to distract myself. I was fidgeting. I was pacing around the house. Like in the end, I'm well aware of how my body is reacting, but I prepared for that. I knew that was going to come, and I knew what I needed to do in order to get through it.
That's so different from several years ago for you, isn't it? Think how far you've come.
Oh, back then, the moment that I started like collapsing cognitively, I'm like, I was like getting angry at myself, going, stop being so pathetic.
Yeah.
Take your head out of your ass and just keep moving forward. Yeah. And I'm like, and so I'll just keep fighting through the pain until the point where literally I destroy myself, and then I'll spend anywhere 3 to 6 months to get out.
And that's being so hard on yourself. It's not showing yourself any compassion at all, is it? I know.
And that was the hardest thing for me to learn, self-compassion. We are all willing to give it to anyone else. Yeah. But why are we so hard on ourselves?
So Nathan and I started to meander off topic a bit. So with a bit of slick editing, we are back to living with PTSD and depression.
It will always be a part of who I am, but my PTSD and depression no longer defines me. That is the essence of everything. And I'm very grateful for those darkest hours, those darkest days, because they taught me to appreciate and see the world in a very different way.
Yeah.
Because in the end, I didn't see the world through colour and emotion and all that. Like in the end, like I wasn't allowing myself to be my own authentic self because I was kept that side very hidden and away. And that's where, for me, I've never been more satisfied with life than what I am right now.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Being open, honest. Like right now, I can tell you right now, best way to describe me, I am a dork. I'm a big, soft, cuddly teddy bear. Absolutely love rom-coms. Notting Hill is like the greatest movie ever made.
Imagine saying that when you're in Afghanistan.
No, 100%.
Let's watch Notting Hill, guys.
God, let's get around it. Big circle. Let's watch this thing. So it's but that's the thing, and it's just like I'm going. That is just who I am.
Yeah.
That is my genre. They are the stories that I love to hear. Doesn't mean I'm not the soldier that I once was. Like, I am still that guy, and if I ever need to access him, I can access him. But it's just about being just true to yourself, being who, not being who you believe others, how you want others to perceive you, but just being you as you are, and keeping in your circle those who love that about you.
Yeah, that's right. People that lift you up.
Oh,
you know?
100%.
Are you still friends with the guys you're in Afghanistan with, some of them, or?
Yeah, I've got a real close group of friends from there. I guess they're friendships forged under very extreme conditions, and I may not see them a year or two at a time, and then suddenly you catch up and like the day's gone by. However, in my early years of recovery, when I was in the worst of it, could not speak to them.
Just had to get away from it?
I had to avoid.
Yeah.
They were a constant trigger of a former life when I was something, when I meant something.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer that person. I'm this shell of a human being.
And you didn't want to show that to them?
It was a shame. I was ashamed.
Yeah.
Ashamed of where I'd fallen.
Had any of your friends also experienced that too? Like, do you know now whether the others?
I know now.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've had many a phone call.
Yeah, I bet.
All hours of the night, guys just calling me up. And I do my best to wake up. But yeah, I've got a lot of mates now who are literally there. You remember them back in the heyday, and we're all young and innocent, full of spirit and cheer, and now they're literally just, there's only ways I know this right, they're just shells.
That's so sad. But they're lucky they've got you.
See, I don't really see that. I just do what I do because, like, there was no one there when I needed it. And I'm like, and if the one thing I want to do, I would love to leave my past behind. But I understand why there was no one there when I needed it, because who wants to constantly relive the darkest days of their lives over and over again? And I go, well, for me, it makes everything worth it. Yeah. That the experiences that I went through are not in vain, that I can actually do some good having been there. And I have to protect myself because in the end I'm only human, and I can't deal with stress like I once could. I have a reduced capacity of coping and job ability, and these are my limitations now.
Yeah, but you know them.
But I had to accept them.
Yeah, yeah.
And you do, when you know how high achieving you were, to going down to where literally you have to accept the fact that you can only do a fraction of what you once could. It takes a lot of accepting, even physically, cognitively, mentally, everything. But at the same time, I'm like, but this whole other world opened up.
That's right. I mean, I guess that's the way to reframe it, isn't it? And not to be thinking, I used to this, I used to that, but thinking, now look.
Yeah.
But yeah, it must be an ongoing issue for you.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And mental health should be a lifestyle for everyone, not something you call upon during times of distress, crisis, or need. It should be something that when you are in the peak of your game, learn the vocabulary, learn and understand it, so that when you do see yourself slipping, if you do find yourself in a situation, you can catch it out early and do something about it, and have the vocabulary to actually begin the conversation instead of what I did, which is literally turned a molehill into the Himalayas because I refused to go there, and then eventually it will come out and bite you.
Yeah. And also I think that if you learn about mental health, then you're going to recognize it. Like, you didn't even know what was going on with yourself because you didn't have any, as you say, any language or literacy around it. And I think schools are doing a better job.
It's starting. Yeah,
it's
fantastic.
starting. The school that my kids are at, they have psychologists come and speak to them about all sorts of things, including, resilience, which I know is a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah.
And body image and consent and all sorts of things where people need agency
100%.
over themselves. So schools are are starting.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a long way to go,
it's a
but
beautiful thing, because I guess for so long schools were nothing more than helping you become a productive member in society for a role.
yeah,
Schools never taught you how to be a good person, which is what you do for every other time that you're not in the office.
that's right.
And so learning about understanding yourself and beginning those conversations early and normalizing it when you're very young, when you're in a very impressionable period of your life. And then you're getting role models to actually champion this sort of conversation. I'm like, you're setting up an entire generation to not only be productive members of society within their role, but also very in tune with who they are as an individual, their friendship groups, communication, everything.
And being more accepting. I just want to digress a little bit. In July last year, the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide was established.
Yep.
It's a kind of a well-known fact, I think, that boys or blokes make up an average of 7 out of 9 suicides every single day in Australia. I mean, sorry, the numbers might not be well-known, but people do know that it's overwhelmingly young boys, males. Yep. And I also found this really interesting information on veteran suicide, that the suicide rates essentially are lower for the guys that remain in the Defence Force, but much higher once they leave.
Get out. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what's your view about this Royal Commission? I don't know much about it, I have to be honest, but is it needed? Is it overdue? Is it broad enough?
Yep. Well, because the military, I got to disclose here, I loved my time in the military. Highlight of my life. However, the thing is, though, they spend millions of dollars teaching you to think, behave, and act in a certain way. And at the end of your career, what they've spent years creating, at the end of the day, they just go, see you later.
Oh, right. So they don't help
transition back. And that's why everyone keeps hearing this thing about transition. Because I'm like, it is a difficult thing, because what they do, they strip your sense of individualism out of you, and they amalgamate you with the army ethos, and you become part of a greater whole.
Yeah.
You are no longer you are part of a team, and your actions will impact those around you, and others' decisions will impact you. No longer do you ever think for yourself, you think for everyone else. That mindset doesn't work in society, greater society. And so, it's just like it's the crudest of examples, but it's the best way to put forth a point. You get an animal like a dog, you domesticate it for 5-6 years, and then one day you say to the dog, go away, be free. What happens?
It dies.
Well,
it can't.
It can't, or it'll come crawling back saying, help me, and scratching at your door.
Yeah.
Welcome to DVA, Department of Veteran Affairs. Veterans unable to reintegrate back into society, and because they weren't given a grace period in order to do so, where the ADF took responsibility, and DVA needs to take responsibility, because they don't talk. They're like loggerheads with each other. They go, no, it's your responsibility, no, it's your... And so now they've created something called Joint Transition Command, which sits there to join the two together.
Right.
Which is a very new creation over the last couple of years or year or so, which is fantastic. But so long overdue.
Yep.
It's a systemic issue.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that a lot of what we do there will create a more productive and increased longevity of soldiers of tomorrow. And it's also about educating soldiers on mental health literacy, the same as what we talked about before, giving them the tools and the words in order to describe their experiences. So if they find themselves in traumatic situations, they can see it in themselves or in others in order to try to start the process early and deal with it in its acute phase rather than allow it to go chronic. And stop the conversation of mental health in the military, its ability to threaten one's deployability. No one spoke about mental health because there was real consequences if you did. They could kick you off a trip.
Right.
We all wanted to go on a tour, go to war.
Well, that's what you'd been training for, right?
100%. That's the grand final. You've been training all day, and then suddenly you go from no games, but you go from training straight to the grand final. We all want to go to the grand final. And
so if you say, I've got a mental health issue, I've got depression, you risk
or
that.
something's wrong and all that, and then suddenly they put a label on your head and suddenly you can get kicked off your tour just like that. And so everyone denied it.
Yep.
And when it came to your post-op psych screens, guys, we all knew what to say.
Yeah.
And we all teach each other what to say. Make sure you walk in and you're like, oh yeah, no, I've seen some really bad stuff, and yeah, it hurt the soul a little bit, but in the end, it's okay. Like in the end, I accept it. This is the situation that I'm in. I'm at war, and it's all okay.
So it's a script.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And so we all cleared.
Yeah. And then
the consequences came out later for each
the
individual.
army's like, oh, great, fantastic, tick that box. He's fine. See you later, mate.
100%. But we lost, 41 soldiers over 14, 17 years at war in Afghanistan. We've lost 700 odd soldiers in the same period to suicide.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the reality is that we are already at war.
Yeah.
But a war that no one was willing to speak about, and it kept getting buried and buried and buried. And now it come to a point now where they can't hide it anymore. And so the Royal Commission is trying to resolve veteran suicide because joining up should be a great stepping stone into a greater living a fulfilled and great life. It shouldn't have a negative impact on one's ability to reintegrate back into society and be a productive member.
Yeah, and also you think about all that excellent training you've had, and what a shame that it can't then be used productively in civilian society, if you know what I mean. Like you've had like the highest degree of training in whichever area you were in, and then to not be able to utilise those skills.
Well,
what a shame.
That was the hardest thing getting out for me because I was in a combat role. And so I got out, and then I'm like, all right, let's get a job. And I'm like, what job can I get where I can specialise in explosives, IED warfare, mine warfare, bridge building, high risk search, chemical CBRN, and advanced decontamination. And I was like, maybe the fireys, but before I knew it, PTSD, and I was like, there was no way they'll let me in. And I was like, before I knew it, I was just like, well, I don't even think McDonald's would accept me. There was a period in my life where I literally thought McDonald's wouldn't even accept my resume. That's how.
After everything you'd done.
100%. Full of experiences, but because they didn't teach you, the military teaches you not to speak through your words, but to speak through your actions. And so it became very discomforting for guys in junior ranks to actually try to communicate what they have learned and what they're good at, because they are taught to do it through their actions. Yeah.
And if you want to get any sort of job, you've basically got to be able to sell yourself and your skills, don't you?
100%. And that's where a lot of these little groups popped up, like Story Right, fantastic in trying to help people turn military jargon into usable employability skills.
Yeah, that needs to be part of the transition, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Saying, okay, this is the skill you've got. Like if we, tweak it this way or that way, it can translate to this. Or
Very much so. So it's you can walk down. A lot to talk about.
So let's get on to what you're doing now with men's mental health. And so it's pretty clear through your own experience that you developed a really deep desire to help other people. And one of the things you do, you raise awareness around men's mental health by public speaking, and you are you're a member of numerous boards and groups and to this end, and you've also become a resilience trainer. So I was kind of interested in that. What does a resilience trainer do?
What does a resilience trainer do? I think it just teaches life skills.
Yeah.
I'm like, what could be more important than better understanding who you are and how you interact with the world? Understanding your lenses and your own biases. Understanding cognitive traps, the way that stress impacts the body, understanding what's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, neuroplasticity. I'm like, people don't even understand that you can teach an old dog new tricks. It's just that sometimes their old trick is so ingrained and they're not willing to put in the effort to change it. Everything we can always change. Have you ever learnt someone's phone number? Well, we don't need to anymore. Have you ever learnt a new skill or anything? I'm like, that is neuroplasticity. You're learning. You can learn anything.
Yep.
It's easy to learn something new rather than trying to undo something old and redo it. It's always the hardest thing we ever do. It's about, I guess, passing on a lot of skills and tools that others, or sharing skills and tools that allow people to better cope with any stresses or obstacles they may face in their own life.
Yep.
And the chances are we all can solve our own problems, and sometimes we just don't have the necessary perspective or outlook to be able to see them for what they truly are, and understanding that we are 9 times out of 10 too emotionally clouded to resolve our own problems. So speaking to even a mate is very important, and that mate actively listening and not trying to pass on unsolicited advice, which is the hardest thing, because we all want to save from someone else. We want to feel buzz about when we're like passing on advice that someone takes on. It's the hardest thing to ever do, just to listen. Your job is to keep them talking and allow them to find the solution, because if they find the solution, they're far more willing to act on that rather than if you tell them a solution.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
From my own experience, my rehabilitation rep literally had to wash me. She knew what I needed, but I wasn't ready.
What's that saying? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
100%. Oh, yeah, and I was refusing. Outright denial that I was parched.
Wow. So, and if we talk about men's mental health, there's a few things that I think are really important to bring out into the open, and mainly that is that men are less likely than women to seek help when they experience mental health issues. So let's look at that. So why are men less likely to seek help?
Well, there's obviously cultural and traditional roots that lead into that. I reckon in a generation or two, things may change drastically because of the movement that's happening right now. But I think just from a historical standpoint, the traditional notions that speaking up about this is actually a weakness has a massive part. Everyone always blames masculinity now, like this whole
toxic masculinity
cultural thing about toxic masculinity. I was like, hang on. I'm like, do you even understand what you've been saying? You're saying that to be a man is toxic. I'm like, you need to like really think about what is being said right now. You're like, oh no, I'm using it as an engrossing word to capture specific tropes. And I'm like, in the end, it's not. There's nothing wrong about being a man.
Of course not.
100%.
Yeah.
The biggest issues that guys are facing is beliefs, is rigidity of views. And it's about trying to help a guy realize that in moments of serious distress, like let's say an accident or a moment where they need to be stoic, they are allowed to be stoic. And to be stoic will serve you greatly. Like on the battlefield, I had to be stoic on the battlefield. But at the same time, when you're struggling with something, it's also being able to cry on a mate's shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's about not having a rigidity of views, and it's about being more dynamic in the way that you perceive yourself. It's not black and white.
It's about both sides of the equation, isn't it?
Very much so, and that's in all aspects of life. And so I think that's the biggest, one of the big points that need to be pushed forth. Plus, there's zero role models when it comes to, like, especially through social media for people about how to act. I'm like, you're getting role models from all over the place, and young kids these days that are just trying to piece together what it means to be a good person, what it means to be a good man, and they have no idea because they're getting information from all over the globe, which is something that we never had 10, 15, 20 years ago. Literally, role models were people who within your local community that you saw and you're like, wow, he's really good. You weren't getting bombarded with information from all over the world.
And role models that are the real, like real men, not some image of someone that's been doctored and,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so
men are less likely to seek help because of that kind of rigid view, which we hope is changing.
Yep.
And so what are some of the barriers then to men seeking help, do you think?
Self-stigma.
Yeah.
Stigma is real. But I think social stigma is denying, because I believe if you ask anyone out there and said, if a mate came up to you struggling with their mental health, would you be willing to listen and support them? And I reckon most people will be like, yes.
Of course, yeah.
It's not social stigma. It is a self-stigma. It's about being that person that actually reaches out and actually openly admits to their friend or whatever that something is wrong.
They need help or they're struggling.
It is the ultimate critique on oneself to admit that you are struggling and you don't have all the answers to help yourself. And so I believe that is one of the biggest barriers. And then there's the shame that is usually integrated in just the sheer belief that they're not able to be self-reliant, they're not able to fulfill some idealized version of what it means to be a man. And so that is definitely one of the biggest barriers out for a lot of guys seeking help.
Let's talk then about solutions. Like how do we solve this problem or move towards a solution? So with your brother Daniel, who I believe is a former World Wrestling Entertainment professional wrestler. That's on the website.
We are. We're an interesting bunch in our family,
So you established with him Bolton Brothers, and that is a psychology company where you take a gendered approach to mental health. So you provide services for men, delivered by men. So talk us through why you set up Bolton Brothers and some of the missions that you have there.
Sure. Well, I guess why we set it up, because I think the needs of men are different. The way that we want to interact and the way that we want to have the conversation, a lot of the latest research is saying that men are different in how they want to, they're problem solvers. They want to talk through their behaviours, goals, and they now have a far greater preference for strengths-based therapies. Females are far more socialised to internalise their symptoms of distress through like melancholy, sadness, and they're actually able to communicate from a cultural standpoint as well and a social standpoint, that they're actually allowed to engage in those conversations. And so we try to keep that in mind and make sure that we offer services that we don't believe are one size fits all. So we believe that we need to play into it's not playing into, but it's about understanding the male experience and making sure that, you know, the opening cover isn't some dude standing going, I can do it. Like, yes, that sunset shot. It's like, in the end, I'm like, that is like the traditional mental health thing. I'm like, there is nothing inspiring about that. Like, in my opinion, mental health needs to evolve. And you can't believe that you are a one size fits all. I know that psychologists can deal with men, females, no dramas. But it's not about you as an individual. It's about understanding that you are there for your clients. And what are your clients' needs? And so we truly aim at those men who are typically perceived as one of our GP once said to us, who refers to us. She's like, any guy that comes in who's like a blokey bloke, who I'm like, this dude needs some support, but I don't know where to send him. I'll send him to Bolton Brothers.
Perfect.
Because although our website's currently under a big overhaul, but we align with how men want to relate and perceive themselves.
And they're more likely to have successful results if they're treated in the way that you know, suits them and speaks to them. And I mean, I think that the analogy for me is when I've had 3 children, I thought I want a female obstetrician, because a man, no matter how good he is, does not know what it feels like to give birth. And it's just one of those things. And so I can imagine a man would think not that they wouldn't want to speak to a woman, but they might feel that they relate more to another man.
And this is the thing, but we do not just hire. It's uncanny. It's like we want female psychologists, because we know that there's a lot of guys will only speak to a female.
fair enough.
Because that conversation is usually engaged with a female and not really a face-to-face with another dude.
Yeah, good point.
And so I know a lot of veterans have actually gone like they want females. In the end, each to their own. My psychologist is a female.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed. But in the end, at the same time, it would have worked if it was someone else. It's just how I interacted with her was perfect. And the softness and the subtleties that she brought to my experience is exactly what I needed at the time in order to help myself recover.
But I guess at Bolton Brothers, you have a special interest in looking at the ways that will help men specifically, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, as you said, it's sort of men engage perhaps differently from women in terms of, you know, they need goals and actions and...
Well, more men are actually seeking help than ever before, but more males are actually taking their life than ever before.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And this is a strange thing that's actually happening, and what they've come to realise is that because men are not being engaged and they're dropping out of treatment early. I'm trying to remember the statistics. 43% of clients of men dropped out of treatment early, and 60% of men who attempted or suicided actually had sought psychological or allied services within the year prior for it.
Right. Okay.
And so obviously guys are going in there not having their needs met.
Yeah, clearly.
And they're literally pretty much like I did, despising the profession and never going back. And so we're trying to resolve that pertinent problem that is existing in that world, going, hey guys, like, no, all hope is not lost, come and see us.
Yeah.
We get it.
What do you need?
And so, and so with Daniel, Daniel has his own experiences, and this is where Bolton Brothers was forged, because I guess I just come back from my second tour. Daniel came off the back from working in the development team with the WWE over in Tampa, Florida, and he has his own story, got caught up in political shitstorm, ended up getting sent home. He was hurting, I was hurting, two brothers leaned on each other, and we literally carried each other through for years.
Wow.
We'd have little moments, we called it the belief generator, where literally we would sell ourselves and say what we're going to do, and it was this moment of hope of a better tomorrow that we'd give to one another, and a lot of it was stemming to what we do today. And
you were lucky to have each other, weren't you?
We were very lucky. We gave each other exactly what we needed in the time we needed it most. And we both had gone through our own horrific experiences.
Another thing you do sort of on that theme is you with your community engagement is you try and break down the barriers to men seeking help.
Yeah.
So what are some of the messages that you're trying to get out there into the community?
Sure. So on the side, I do a lot of public speaking. I go out there and share my own stories, my experiences, I guess the mistakes that I made. I made some horrific mistakes in my time. But more importantly, the lessons that I learned along the way. The main big three that we really push would be mental health awareness, stigma reduction, and the promotion of help-seeking behaviour. Because in the end, everyone always talks about the first step for anyone is to reach out when they're struggling to reach out. And I'm like, not really. To me, I don't believe that is the first step. The first step is actually for that person to be inspired to see that something's wrong in the first place.
Sure. You're not going to reach out if you
don't believe anything's wrong. And so I do what I can in order to inspire people to see within themselves and see differently. Yeah. And I tear my life apart and put it on there on the chopping block for others to completely judge me. And it is nerve-wracking every time I'm up there, because you're up there in front of strangers. You're not talking about leadership or some amazing. You're literally bearing the depths of your soul and everything you've done wrong and your shortcomings and your failures, and going, here, take it. And if you've made any of the mistakes that I made, don't do what I did. That's
incredible. I mean, it's really, I think it sounds really brave to do that, because not a lot of people would want to do that.
So I'm not very good at compliments. That was I'll just say thank you. It's but I just, I don't know. It's just amazing all I want is people to understand that we've all been dealt a set of cards.
Yeah.
And yes, your cards may not be as good as the cards of the person next to you, but they're your cards. And you have to choose the best way to play your set of cards.
Yeah.
With the limitations that it has.
Yeah.
You may not get the jackpot, but you may win a few hands. And when you overcome one obstacle, one adversity, hey, in the end, you'll be on to the next and to the next. There is no, once you accomplish or once you get past this one, it's all over. No, I'm like, in the end, happiness and joy does not come from completing something. It comes from the process of trying to complete it.
Yeah.
Problems that are hard enough that they challenge us, but not easy enough that they give us no joy or satisfaction having accomplished. And it's just that life, as the Buddhist
life is messy.
One truth, yeah. Life is suffering. That is the basis of the Buddhist first truth, or whatever it is.
Absolutely, the Buddhist first truth.
I'm like, enjoy the fact that life is suffering and do everything you can in order to just roll through it. Yeah. Take the punches when the punches come, and take the good when the good comes, and own your mistakes. Be accountable for everything that you do and everything that you are.
Well, that's brilliant. That's so... Of all the experiences you've had in your life, your training, your deployment, your mental health issues, your recovery, your current work, what are your life lessons? What would you say are the sort of the greatest lessons you've learnt along the way?
Be your authentic self. Like, I remember I was asked once, Nathan, if you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self something, what would you tell them? That was quite a profound question for me because I'd never been there before. And I'm just like, it's okay to not have all the answers.
Yeah.
And it's not a weakness to struggle. It's just a part of what it's going to be. And if you go through experiences, find the courage to actually do something about it. You can either dedicate your life to ruminate on experiences that you can't personally overcome, or you can swallow your pride for a brief moment. Seek help, invest in your mental health, and do what is necessary so that you can move on past it and potentially flourish because of it.
And I think you used the word courage there, and I think that's a really good way of reframing it, because courage, I think, was traditionally seen as sort of doing stoic, sort of acting stoically, whereas it actually does take courage to admit that you're struggling, that you might need help. I mean, that's courageous. And
I never saw it until recently when I finally, from everything that I've been through, and I know how much I struggle and the fear that I go through doing what I do, and I'm like, but yet I get up anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in the end, you can take criticism, you can take the critique of others, but in the end, from the wise words of, was it Theodore Roosevelt, I am the man in the arena. And so I'll take the criticisms from those who are also in the arena.
Yeah.
I love that. It's the greatest piece of literature I've read. I love that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So if someone listening to this podcast knows someone or themselves think they need some kind of help, what should they do? Like if it's a young man, for example.
If you can get them talking, just listen wholeheartedly. As I said, no unsolicited advice, and reward them for sharing.
Yeah.
Because the risk that they potentially just took in unloading and confiding in you, that is a make or break. In 2013, I was in a real bad place, still in the military, and I went to pick up a boat with a mate. He had just bought this boat and I went for it. And as we're driving there, I literally, everything was just stewing and bottling up, and I didn't know what was going on. And it got to a point where I broke. And out of nowhere, to my mate, I was just like, dude, and I absolutely unloaded the pain, that was just built up inside me to my mate for like 2 minutes. Just went on this rant expression session. And I felt $1 million after it. And then I looked at him. And then he was just like, what the hell was that? And then I looked at him, and then he's just like, I'm like, oh God, he's awkward. And then everything got really awkward between us. No. And I'm like, Nathan, shut your mouth before you commit like social suicide here. And he's just like, oh God. And he's trying to put words out, and he doesn't know what to do, what to say. And literally everything went silent for like a few minutes. And then in that silence, a few minutes later, he finally mustered the words. You know, man, sometimes you just got to tough it out. There's a beautiful lesson in that. Firstly, I never spoke to anyone else ever again until it almost cost me my life. The punishment was so great. You never know if you're that person's first time they've ever said this to you. Whenever someone does it, always believe it is their first and give them undivided attention. And if you can't give them the undivided attention, say, hey, can we continue this conversation? I'm elsewhere right now. Can we do this in like 5-10 minutes? Yeah. Just give me a moment. We'll be back. But also choose the right person.
Yeah. See, that guy, he would not have had the tools either.
No. And I know he was the wrong person. I had the mate there, like another guy who I know I should have had this conversation with. But that was my moment, and I chose him, and I was punished for it, and I never spoke again.
Oh, God, that's so sad, isn't it?
And so for anyone, just, it's take it as an honor that someone trusts you with the darkest moments of their life, and they're willing to share it with you. Yeah. Because it is a privilege. And you don't have to have all the answers. Your goal is nothing more than to keep them talking. As I said before, keep them talking. And if you think you can find a solution, throw different ideas out there, throw different perspectives out there. You're not emotionally involved in the pain there, so they may not be able to see clearly. I'm not going to say that because that's just super simple. Say it. Because it may be that simpleness, that simplicity that they need.
It's been clouded.
Yeah. Paraphrase. They may have thrown 10 minutes of filth at you, and you clarify it in a paragraph. And then suddenly you have just helped create a narrative over an experience that was this fragmented thought into this condensed thing. And then suddenly it's a lot easier, far more easy to handle and manage. It's no longer as big as what it once was. Yeah. And then literally from there, you just a few little steps, stages, and you break it down.
I like what you said about not having all the answers. So if someone is bearing their soul to you, you can listen and, as you say, listen and concentrate on what they're saying. And it doesn't matter if you don't have all the answers.
It's about being a good human, being a good mate, being just a good person. And when a friend is in need, being there for them. Yeah. Yeah. Don't overthink it like I used to do. But in the end, obviously, there's great little courses out there like Accidental Counselor that give you those tools and tips to make you feel more confident in doing it. But in the end, I'm like, if one of your best friends came up to you, just how would you deal with it? How would you act? And that's no different for anyone else.
Yeah, you just listen. Yeah. And care. Yeah. And love. And
inspire hope.
Yes.
That tomorrow can be different. Tomorrow can be better. Because hope is the greatest weapon we have against the darkest days.
Yeah. Well, hope's what keeps us going, isn't it?
Amen to that.
Yeah. I guess it's time for us to wrap this up. And I have to ask, so you were in the army, your brother was a wrestler. Who would win an arm wrestle with you two?
Oh, well, I might blow out a bicep or tear a hamstring or something, or strain the old deltoidus phalange. Sounds like a muscle. So I'd probably lose. I took a bit of a hiatus from the gym in recent times, but hey, I think he has as well. So where it's that would be, I think, quite a close match.
It'd probably go for ages because you'd both be so determined.
God.
And the final question, Nathan, that I like to ask all my guests is, if you could recommend 2 things that people could do to improve their well-being, they can be anything at all, what would they be?
Sure. 2 biggest things, exercise and connection.
Yep.
Don't ever sacrifice those two. They're the two. They say what smoking is the new loneliness. Loneliness is the new smoking. There's an expression that I've heard recently. Never underestimate the power and the toxic impact that loneliness has on you. And you can be surrounded by people and still be lonely. Exactly, yes. Connection is connecting with people. And as Alan de Botton once said, if you want to connect with somebody, there's 3 questions that you need to ask that person. He goes, sit down next to him and tell him something that you regret, something that you are ashamed of, and something that you are sad about.
Wow. That's being vulnerable, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
We all can relate to that, but we're all too afraid to do it.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to be the first person going in there and to be perceived in the wrong way. Yeah, you're going to land some, you'll miss some, like anything. So exercise connection. And also, so I always called it MCG, but I soon learnt that the Resilience Project, he called it GEM. Mine was mindfulness, compassion, and gratitude. He has gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness.
Yeah.
And it's funny how 2 completely different experiences both end up at the same place.
Yeah,
they are the 3 things that I love. The best things I've ever learned.
The best way to live.
Mindfulness. By those. Being here in the present moment. Being there. Don't drift off in the past, the future. Be there in the moment and live. And not worry about everything else around you. Easier said than done.
Much easier said than done.
Then practice it. Do what you need to do, either through formal methods or informal methods. I use my motorbike to do mindfulness. When I go off into the hills, that is me doing my own mindfulness. You may find your own ways of doing it. Compassion or empathy, not only for self but for that of others.
Yeah.
And never mistake kindness for weakness. And gratitude. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm like, be grateful for what you have.
Yes.
Not for what you don't. And it's so simple. And people go, oh, that's not wisdom. That's not anything new. I'm like, the thing about resilience or any of these skills, you're not reinventing the wheel. But the reality is the simplest of theories are always the hardest to attain because they're the easiest forgotten and overlooked. Yeah.
So on that note, I think we'll draw this fascinating conversation to a close, but I'll just ask you finally, so if people want to connect with you or Bolton Brothers, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Please reach out. We're on Facebook. We've got Bolton Brothers on Facebook or our website, or follow us on Instagram, Bolton Brothers, or please email us admin@boltonbrothers.com.au and we'll be happy to answer any questions and help out wherever we can.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put a link to all of that in the show notes. And Nathan, thank you so much for sharing with me today. I've loved this conversation. It's just been so interesting and such an important topic as well.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
And that was men's mental health advocate, resilience trainer and former Special Forces soldier, Nathan Bolton, sharing his knowledge with us. And for me, that was a real honour because his life experiences have led him to the extremes of both physical and mental pain. So I do hope that you got something out of this episode and that you found it interesting as I did. If you did, please share the podcast and tell your friends about it. And if you could take a minute to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, it will help people find my podcast, and I'm always really grateful for that. Please follow me on Instagram at vibrant_lives_podcast and check out my website at www.vibrantlivspodcast.com. There you'll find a library of all the podcast episodes I've done and reviews of books I recommend and more. So please DM me or send me an email via the contacts page on my website and let me know what you'd like to hear more of or learn about, or if you just want to say hi. Thank you so much for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.